Hello there, welcome back to the channel. This is Nerd World, and today we're examining the USS Vengeance from the Kelvin Timeline, an alternate reality that diverged from the primary Star Trek timeline when a Vulcan ship made an impromptu visit to the past and created a divergent time stream. In this time stream, Section 31, which did exist in the prime timeline, of course, at that exact period as a relatively formal agency, would turn itself into a much more prominent and more military arm of the Federation and develop one of the most technologically advanced and powerful ships of the Federation's Navy in the 23rd century, a ship that could outgun, outfight, and outdo anything else in the fleet and pretty much anything else in their enemies' fleets. And that was the USS Vengeance. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and also check out all of my socials on Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook, stuff like that. All links in the description below, as well as my other channels. And with that said, let's start this on the Vengeance. Right, so let's get started. The USS Vengeance was a Federation starship, but not technically a Starfleet vessel. It was operated partially and constructed partially by Starfleet, but was primarily manned and operated under the supervision of Section 31 for security matters. The vessel's exact size and dimensions are a little classified, shall we say, but it was certainly the fastest and largest ship in the Federation. It was specifically tasked with and developed to defend the Federation's borders against potential Romulan or Klingon attack, but was capable of dealing with any perceived known or unknown enemy to the Federation and Starfleet at the time. The ship's construction was supervised by the head of Starfleet, Admiral Marcus, at a secret construction facility for the development of classified types of vessels in orbit of the moon Io in the Jovian system, otherwise known as Jupiter. It would be launched in 2259, but similar to the advanced Klingon bird of prey developed by General Chang in the prime timeline, a Burrell-class vessel equipped with an advanced cloaking device that allowed it to fire its torpedoes while cloaked, the Vengeance would never really be used for the job that it should have been used for, which was the defense of the Federation. It should also be noted the vessel was not officially known as the USS Vengeance. It was only referred to as the Vengeance by its crew and operators. There was no markings on the ship declaring the vessel. It also had no identifying markers such as a registry number. This was fairly standard with Section 31, meaning that both officially and unofficially the vessel is known as the USS Vengeance, but as it was not a Starfleet ship, it never got a Starfleet registry, it would have had Section 31 marker of some description, which is unknown. Referencing it as USS Vengeance is more just something perhaps Admiral Marcus or the others like to call it. This was in response to the destruction of Vulcan, which at the time was perceived as a Romulan attack. As a result, Vengeance. It was also notable that this vessel and the technology behind it went into development after the destruction of Vulcan at the hands of Nero. The designer and engineer behind the ship, or at least one of them, was a man named Khan, a 20th century genetically augmented human, a superhuman if you will, who had superior intellect, was quickly able to adapt to 23rd century technology and make improvements. These improvements to the ship would include an increased warp velocity, an ability to fire its weapons while at warp, which was something not thought to be possible at the time, as well as superior transporters, shields, and other auxiliary systems. It could also be operated by a crew, or at least operated by a singular individual on the bridge of the ship. The weapon systems included enhanced phasers, which were just basically normal phasers but capable of firing in beam or pulse form. It also carried photon torpedoes, which were launched from swivel-mounted launchers. One of the other weapons the ship was shown to demonstrate was the ability to launch an armed drone that would be fired at the ship, and as it approached its target it would deploy photon torpedoes of its own at the target at any weak point it could detect before ramming the target itself for pure kinetic force. The ship was, as I say, enormously powerful and huge, at least twice the size of a Kelvin Timeline Constitution-class starship such as the USS Enterprise, which simply stood no chance in battle against it. The Vengeance was able to make relatively short work of the Enterprise, although it should be noted it did catch the Enterprise off guard, and the Enterprise was already damaged from prior engagements and sabotage. But even without those advantages, the Enterprise simply stood no chance against the Vengeance under the command of either Admiral Marcus or Khan himself. And there we have a basic breakdown of the USS Vengeance. Now, a ship like this does exist in the Prime Timeline in various forms. In the Prime Timeline, for example, Section 31 do operate ships that operate their own independent support craft, drone-type vessels that can be used in combat. They also have a USS Vengeance in the Prime Timeline, but it was a Miranda-class starship, not a Dreadnaught-class starship operated by Section 31. Now, I personally really like this ship. I'm not a huge fan of the movie. I think I've said in previous videos I'm not a massive fan of the Kelvin Timeline. I enjoy Into Darkness in and of itself, but I've always felt that bringing Khan into it was a bit of a betrayal of the fans, considering Jar Jar Abrams was told repeatedly by the fandom we didn't want to see Khan. Now, I do like the film in and of itself and on its own merit, but understanding the Khan character, Benedict Cumberbatch is a tall, lanky British guy. Khan was not. Also, he was meant to be a superhuman, and as much as I can easily believe that Benedict Cumberbatch is a superhuman, you could really believe it when you looked at Ricardo Montalban. Also, when you think about what an augment is not just a human. They're a little more than a human. They are the best genetic stock that humans have to offer, plus the DNA being cleaned and then enhanced. They're technically a different species, and although they probably can interbreed with normal humans, children of an augment would be an augment because they're another species. And I'm going a little off tangent here, but stay with me. It would have been, along those lines, really easy because of that, because in series such as Andromeda, the Nietzscheans were a spin-off idea that Gene Roddenberry had for where the augments were going to go, what they were going to turn into. It's very easy for this man not to have been Khan. They could have simply made him one of his acolytes or a descendant or anything, absolutely anything, other than the literal Khan. I think I've said in a previous video, I like in my headcanon to believe that actually his name was John Harrison, and that actually he just pretended to be Khan because he realised that stupid human savages 300 years after he was supposedly dead wouldn't know the difference. I'll just say I'm Khan. One augment's the same as another, technically speaking. The same as one human is the same as another. Biologically speaking, he was exactly the same as Khan. And that's what I like to believe, although it's not true, because that's not what J.J. Abrams was actually doing. And that annoys me. But the ship itself, love it. I do agree with some breakdowns as to what the hell the big negative space is in the saucer section, but there are rationales behind it, which you can think. Now, I've had discussions with the Trekkies before. They say, well, it doesn't need that big hole in the saucer section. Not like it needs to reduce weight. No, it doesn't. No, but mass does affect warp drive, so actually redundant, huge extra space in the saucer section the vessel simply doesn't need could be beneficial. Yes, it's not necessarily aerodynamics or anything else. The ship's never going to need to enter an atmosphere except when it's crashing, but all the same, there is a rationale for it. Having that allows you to have fighter bays and shuttle bays and other enclosed sensitive areas that would normally be like a shuttle bay on a starship, big and apparent and obvious, easy target for ships launching and embarking. But if you actually enclose it within that part of the saucer, you actually protect them with the ship itself. It makes them less of a target if you're in a combat situation or whatever else. There are a multitude of rationales for having it, and again, mass, and my math skills are less than good, but I do know that mass still matters in space. So actually, if the ship really did have all this extra space it simply didn't need, condensing everything into parts of the saucer more efficiently and then plugging this section out was relevant. And there's another point. Starfleet was always very modular. In Section 31, despite not being Starfleet, it was still a human agency, it was still a Federation agency, it still would have thought along the same design lines, clearly, because this ship still looks sort of like a bastardized child of a sovereign and a constitution class to me. Maybe something could literally plug into it. It was a plug-and-play section. We know you can literally remove the bridge, remove the engineering, plug an entirely new one in. You build it on Earth, or on Mars, or wherever, put it up into space, the ship comes along, you take out the old one, you plug in a brand new one, and the crew on board then walk into an entirely new section of the ship that simply wasn't there before. mission-specific modules, you might want to call them. It is possible that that negative space was for something along those lines. Possible, maybe not necessarily true, but it is possible. All the same, those are my theories on the ship and its exact breakdown. So with that said, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, check out all my socials, as I said, my websites and Patreon and other things that are all down there. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and bye-bye.